Bullshit.
It's the No BS Marketing Show. I'm your host, Dave Mastovich. Our guest today is Tricia Warrick. Tricia has served as Chief Operating Officer, Strategic Consultant, M&A Advisor, and Banker to CEOs and shareholders of more than 500 mid-market companies. Earlier in her career, she had led mid-market and business banking at Mellon. She now facilitates successful business and leadership transformations as a chair for Vistage Worldwide, the world's leading chief executive organization. Tricia, welcome to part 2 of the No BS Marketing Show.
Dave, great to be here. Thank you.
In the first part of the show, we were going through some of your background, and you talked about how you're one of 7, and you had 5 brothers, and they were like your first set of mentors, if you will, and your father as well. But one of your brothers saw your grades, your report card, and said, we've got to make sure you go to college, back in a time when that wasn't as common for anyone, and particularly for females. So you then go and get your education at Kenyon College in Ohio, and you did well academically. You come out, you said you ended up fortunately getting 2 management trainees very early in your career, one with Kaufman's, and then you moved on to Maryland National Bank. You got involved in the executive MBA program and had a couple of key mentors. And then at a very young age, you were pretty much managing this mid-market function. You gave us your example of both BS in the workplace when there was not a good understanding of the customer, and then your own time when you were the BSer, when you kind of pushed salespeople out without the marketing. And you tied it all back to the rant that I had from episode 1 about how sales is more short-term focused and marketing is more long-term focused. So you went through a lot of that stuff. Let's jump into the next part of your career. How did you make this shift, which is how you and I got to know each other a little bit as you were at Mark Advertising in a very lofty position. Then I got to deal with you at Vistage. So I'm here, even though I know you pretty well, I'm still thinking, when's this transition happen from the banking to the marketing, branding, advertising?
Wow, that's a great question. And, there's a whole part of my career that I haven't even mentioned. In 1994, I, at the time, was running business banking for Mellon, and Mellon was making a lot of changes, really positioning the company to split the company out and become BNY Mellon over a period of years, more on the institutional and investment side, and actually sell off its branch system. I was on the side that the bank was going to sell off, and I was aware of that and was making some decisions for myself personally, given at the time that I had a 6-year-old who missed me quite a lot, and I missed him. And I made a decision in 94 that a couple things happened. Mellon was trying to promote me into a position that I wasn't really excited about, running basically the trust area for Mellon nationally, so which would have put me on the road more and got me further away from my passion for serving middle market companies. And so what I did was I made a decision to leave. And it was a really great decision for me. At the time, I was reading a book that everyone knows, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And I did the eulogy in the chapter called Begin with the End in Mind. They actually have you write your own eulogy from the perspective of 4 different people in your life. And I realized that based on what I wanted people to say, which is what they have you do in the book, that I was on the wrong train, wrong tracks, going in the wrong direction. First and foremost, because I was missing the middle market. Well, actually, first and foremost, because I was missing my son. So work-life balance, that term had never been uttered at the point when I was struggling with all of this, but that's what it was. And secondly, I was missing being with the middle market clients. So I made a decision to leave. In a couple months later, I took a position at Deloitte and started up and ran their strategic advisory and M&A practice for the Ohio Valley region. And that took me down a path for 15 years doing that for Deloitte, then starting my own company with 2 partners and having a strategic advisory and investment banking firm for 10 years with those 2 partners. And then the last few years for Schneider Downs Corporate Finance. I actually co-led their corporate finance and advisory practice. So over that 15-year period, you talk about my 500 clients. I gathered quite a few of them during that time, selling their businesses, doing strategic advisory for them, buy-side merger and acquisition. So that's sort of a big chunk of my life we didn't talk about. I thought I'd mention that. And that led me to a door. So I met met many new clients over that period of time. One of those clients was Mark USA. I had done some consulting for Mark over the years, and in early 2010, my phone rang when I was at Schneider Downs Corporate Finance. I wasn't looking for a job. I was quite happy there. And the key shareholders proposed that I come in as their chief operating officer. So in 2010, on a leap of faith, for the very, very first time in my career, I went in-house with a middle market company.
So you do that, and you now have to get to know the people already as a key advisor, key strategic advisor. So you know the stakeholders already, and you know the company well. So that's better than most people have when they go into a company. But as you're saying, it's a pretty big shift now to go in from being strategic advisor to be in-house. And I jokingly say on this show, having lived this a number of times, leaving to big positions, leaving a great position, like you left a number of great positions to go to another great position. And I jokingly say there's a time when you doubt yourself, and it's the oh God moment. And I jokingly say one of the positions I went to, I thought at 10:50 on the first day, I thought, oh God, what have I done? Whereas other places it might have took till 2 months and you still just got right through it. You said, yeah, whatever, I'll fight through it. When you first did that, what was that first day, week, month like when you shift from a completely different mindset?
Two things come to mind for me. First of all, culturally, I had spent my entire career working for public companies, working for banks, highly regulated, working in the consulting side of audit and tax practices of accounting firms, highly regimented, rules-oriented, process-driven, and also to some degree regulated in the case of the accounting firms. Those cultures were similar. Going into Mark USA, an advertising agency strongly dominated by creative types and very retail focused. Our client base was very retail focused. Was a tremendous cultural shift for me to make. I actually loved it. It was a world that I had only known from afar, as you know, some of my clients were in more creative businesses. And for me, it actually invigorated me to be in that world where there was a little bit more room for innovation and creativity and driving results by helping clients to transform themselves. And it really was, so that was actually important for my Vistage role because I saw the power of transformation with the way that Mark helped their clients. So that's the one side of the question as far as that shift. The other side of the question as far as the shift, and I think this happens in one's career many times. I don't think any of us really understand what set of skills we're carrying around until we're put into that situation where we're like, oh my goodness, what did I do here?
Yes.
And early on, Tony Bucci's the chairman at Mark. And within the first week or so, I said, at some point, I'd like to know what my job is. I was the chief operating officer, but really wanted to get a better sense as to what expectations were. And Tony gave me some good advice. He basically said, do your job for the next, couple months, and then let's talk. And what I realized is that while Mark was this amazing powerhouse on the marketing side with these big national retail accounts, what they were lacking, and I think that where I added the most value was that I was bringing to that culture and to that management structure senses of accountability, processes, and disciplines to drive the success of the business. So my guess is, and I only worked at Mark, but that if you went into more creative companies, you would find what I found at Mark, which was that it was really an opportunity. It wasn't a problem. It was the opportunity to bundle up and bottle up all of that talent to stay much more focused, not just on creative product and what that creative product looked like and how great it was, but also on making money and on driving the top line of the business. So those are the two big sort of ahas I had in the first 6 months there.
For those of you that maybe aren't aware of Mark Advertising, a very large advertising agency, office in Pittsburgh, very well known, highly reputable from a creative standpoint. Full disclosure, as top marketing person at UPMC, we worked extensively with Mark Advertising, very strong on the creative side. So what I look at from this, Tricia, is you made a successful move from what could be described as two of the more different types of industries. One, purely creative and non-regulated and all about messaging, and it's a professional services kind of firm. So it's just completely different from a more analytical, more detailed, more regulated financial one. And what I want to commend you for is you said that you love that. And what that shows is a great deal of self-awareness and self-confidence, because what I've found a lot of people do is when they go into something that has different skill sets, they immediately just get hung up on, oh my gosh, what are people going to think? I don't know that. I've never done that. And it sounds to me like you were able to come in and say, I've not done this, but this is cool. Let me use my expertise. And that takes a great deal of self-confidence.
Thank you. Yes, indeed.
It's because when you think about it, that's one of the biggest things as leaders and coaches that we both do, because a lot of what Mass Solutions does is coaching on the messaging and the leadership on the marketing function. And what Vistage is all about is personal and professional growth. And when I work with clients and friends, and I see even Vistage Group, that's a lot of the problem, is the lack of self-awareness, that even though I don't have the confidence, lack of self-awareness and self-confidence, because the self-awareness is that just because I haven't done that doesn't mean that I can't be good at it.
Right, right. And when I think back on it and I look at the decision that Tony Bucci and Michelle Fabrizi made in bringing me in, I have to commend them as well. They understood as a private company that they had an opportunity and that their leadership team was lacking those skills that I brought to the table. And for them to actually go out and try to find that person who in many respects was a Martian to a lot of the senior leaders and bring me in was pretty amazing. Mm-hmm. And on the private company side, there's less, I believe most companies are less self-reflective, and that those shareholders understood what they were missing and did something about it, which I actually can commend them for.
You had mentioned before we hit the record that you were there about 5.5 years,
right.
Had a successful run. Then you said how some of this stuff helped you to understand your role here in Vistage. When did you realize you were going to make the Vistage move, and how did you go about doing that?
Vistage had actually approached me back in 2006 to take over the a CEO peer group for another chair. And at the time I was at Schneider Downs and not really looking to make any move. But it was very interested in their business model and in the high value drivers of the Vistage offering to CEOs of middle market and small companies. So I kept that in my back pocket and kept that in the back of my head. And over that period of 5 years at Mark, we actually positioned the company. And in late 2015, the company was sold to a private equity firm. And I knew that I wasn't going to retire. My husband and I joked about it, but he kept telling me I failed retirement with my Vistage move. But I let the shareholders at Mark know that I would leave after the company was sold. So I parted ways with them, knowing that I had one more really fun run around the bases that I was going to do. And again, taking that additional experience of being inside of that private company for 5 years and us getting to the point we did successfully and then selling it and wanting to parlay that back in to helping a multitude of CEOs to become more successful. So adding that to my basket of skills, I knew that being a Vistage chair was in a sense, it was destiny. I knew that was the final gem in my crown as far as having been inside of a private company, to give me a level of awareness as to what happens inside of private companies that I did not have before I did that job. So it was a perfect segue into doing what I intend to do for several years now, which is helping many CEOs to become more successful, become better leaders, and candidly, lead better lives.
That's Tricia Warrick, and you're listening to the No BS Marketing Show. I'm Dave Mastovich. So, hey, BSers, I like to tell you about stuff that goes beyond marketing but still somehow ties to marketing. Make sure you sign up for Audible if you're not there, and if you are, I got a book for you to get. You can get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/nobs. Try a book like Running with the Devil, A Backstage Pass to the Wild Times, Loud Rock, and the Down and Dirty Truth Behind the Making of Van Halen by Noel Monk and Joel Layden. And why do I say that this applies to people that maybe don't even like Van Halen? The stories in this book and what Tricia and Vistage are all about is personal and professional growth, leadership, self-awareness, and communication. That's even what the No BS Marketing Show is all about, leadership and communication. Well, when Van Halen hit their peak with the album 1984, they were at the best time of their career and their life, and they were ranked as one of the top rock and roll bands of all time. And it was the worst time. And the reason it was the worst time was because of the absence of good communication and the struggle from a leadership standpoint between the parties, David Lee Roth, Diamond Dave, and Eddie Van Halen, and Noel Monk as the manager. It was a constant struggle. And there's some regrets because they were at their peak and did their achieve their most fame and their tour. And like many rock and roll bands, like many entertainers, like many music artists, they didn't know how to handle that. And that's really what leadership and communication is all about, right, Tricia?
Absolutely.
And so
absolutely,
you have to be able to have the self-awareness and be able to communicate with each other and be able to give in and be able to realize maybe your weaknesses and maybe utilize something like predictive index so you can get a better understanding of yourself and others. So check it out on that book, Van Halen. Go to audibletrial.com/nobs for your free audiobook, over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Tricia, that's an interesting little sidebar, is that when you see many people I've found throughout my life struggle with success. Have you seen that?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so as a Vistage coach, do you run into that sometimes where people are really at their peak and they just keep doing crazy stuff and you got to try and coach them to get out of their way?
There is no question. There is no question about that, Dave. I mean, I at the risk of divulging personal confidences, which I certainly won't do publicly. Vistage is a very confidential organization. Some of my members, I think probably if I were to go to the number one challenge that they have, I mentioned it earlier on, it's work-life balance. Being the CEO of a private company is all-consuming. It is not just leading a company. It is taking care of their employees. They have very close relationships with their customers in many cases, and those customers in my member group can be anywhere from a Fortune 500 company to an elderly patient. But my CEOs are very high touch and very dedicated to their work, and not just to the success of their companies, but to the commitments that they have to their people and their customers and their communities. And as such, I would say that the biggest struggle that they have is work-life balance. The lights never get turned off for these companies.
And what happens when you struggle to get that work-life balance is when we all become into a difficult situation. And I talk about predictive index a lot, but when we're in a situation that's draining us, our worst behaviors come out. And it happens to me as well. You have to constantly manage self by saying, how do I keep myself out of those situations as much as possible? And then how do I, when I'm in that situation, actually realize what's happening? So when you think about a sports team that goes through it, the Cleveland Cavaliers, I'm a big basketball guy, they're pretty much done now. You know, they lost to the Warriors. LeBron's fighting with Kyrie Irving. They're going to lose Kyrie Irving. They brought in Derrick Rose. So they are going to basically, they had this pinnacle 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, and they're going to go down. You take any sport, you can find that. The music, rock and roll bands, hip hop artists, this stuff happens where people struggle with success because of what you're saying. There's a lack of balance and a lack of self-awareness. So you understand when you're putting yourself in a situation that drains you, or when you're in a situation that drains you, how to try to respond and manage it better.
You know, Dave, that is so true. And I didn't mention this to you. My group of CEOs, who I meet with on a monthly basis, made a decision to read 7 Habits of Highly Effective People together. I mentioned that book earlier.
Yes.
A book that had a huge impact on me. And so since the beginning of 2017, we have been reading this book together habit by habit and discussing it. And they say that I'm a taskmaster because I haven't allowed them to get off of the third habit. And the third habit is put first things first. Put first things first means being able to identify those activities that advance the longer term priorities that you have, back to your long-term versus short-term earlier on, those important initiatives that may not be front and center when you turn your lights on in the morning. And to your point about the Cavaliers, to your point about, these groups, these musical bands who over a period of time sort of flame out, it is because they don't have that long-term view and they haven't identified those few key things that will keep them going longer term and keep that momentum going towards longer term objectives. So in my group, we spent 3 months talking about put first things first, because it is one of the biggest challenges of mid-sized and small companies who are basically spending all of their time working on their business, putting out fires, taking care of the day-to-day, and don't spend, Stephen Covey, the author, calls it the big rocks. Don't spend an adequate amount of time dedicating their talents and time and resources to advancing those longer-term initiatives that are not urgent, but important.
So
and
true.
That's personal and professionally.
Well, it's so true, and I'm guilty of it myself, and constantly a work in progress. But what you just said is so important, because when you're in any position, really, it doesn't have to be just a mid-market company or a small business. Because I even know in my days at UPMC, when I was able to succeed the most was when I would get past the crisis of the day, and I used to get so frustrated that the excuses were always made that, well, this happened Tuesday. Well, yes, something's going to happen Wednesday too. And I was actually better at that than in my own business. And I think it's because I own it and there's a whole psychological thing that I need therapy for. But it's what you said, the crisis of the day is what everyone will have. And they look in the mirror and go, that's why I didn't get it done. That's true. You're not lying. That crisis did happen, and you do need to get that done, but you can't lose sight of, just because of the crazy stuff that's going to happen, to not get the big picture done.
No question about it.
I love that you're making them stay on chapter 3. That I'm in habit 3.
We have moved on to think win-win. We have moved on at this point, but we spent a few months on that. And the one point I'll make, and I loved your example of, just your days and the days, the frustration there is when you get through a whole week and say, what did I do all week? And one of the things about that book that I find very interesting, now I'm now rereading this after many years, is the idea of planning on a weekly basis. We have gone back to the concept of planning in this discussion several times, but being able to commit and actually block the time as part of your calendar during a particular week, just to make sure that those big initiatives get the necessary time to advance them. Well,
this is a nice segue then, because before we hit record, you told me what your tool is, and I can't wait for you to tell the audience, because I think the tool solves what we just said. It's the way to start looking at things that, not forgetting to push the big stone or rock that Stephen Covey wrote in his book, and not focusing just on the urgent. So talk about your tool that you think can help our audience.
Well, just to step back for a second, I mentioned my tenure at Mark USA and what an honor it was to be a part of that company for the period of time that I was there. And very early on in the time that I was there, I had done a lot of strategic planning. And I always called it Kawasaki motorcycle strategic planning, because mid-sized companies and small businesses don't have the time or resources to do a McKinsey type strategic plan. They have to do something that's quick, that gets them to a point where they are highly focused on a few things that they can move forward over a period of, whether it's 3 years, 5 years, it might be 2 years, whatever. And combining my strategic planning experience and background with a concept called a vision horizon. Is what we did at Mark. And really, a vision horizon is one piece of paper, and I'd love to share it with you and with the folks listening in.
We'll put it on the show notes.
What it does is it actually takes what we've talked about, which is identifying 3 to 4 key strategic initiatives. And when I say strategic, they move the needle long term. It's not something that I'm going to do today that I check off my list, but something where there's a whole program or process around focusing on something critical to the long-term success of the company. And you articulate 3 or 4 of those, and you communicate them. And what we did was we established accountability and buy-in among a very talented leadership team. And any company can do this, where you establish what is the game plan behind each of these? What is the plan that we're going to do to achieve this particular goal? And they become action items, and they become projects, or it may be a restructuring of your organization around it or whatever. But you actually then every month or every week in your leadership meetings, you pull this piece of paper out, and the leadership team reports in on what progress they are making week by week, month by month, in moving Stephen Covey's big rocks forward in order to achieve your objectives. And again, it's not a glossy, bound, 82-page strategic plan, but it is the key elements of strategic planning, which is clarity of direction, setting those goals, and then establishing accountability and plans around how to effectuate each of those strategies, and then revisiting in order to drive those agendas forward.
You had mentioned that, again, in our pre-talk while we're getting all set up here, that people were bringing that sheet of paper and had stuff written in the margins, and it was crumpled up because they brought it to every meeting. So it became like almost like a mantra or something, that as soon as you started the meeting, everyone knew to have that ready.
Right. And we did revisit that all the time and talked about, and again, one of the other things that's important is things change. You can put these plans in place. The market can change. Your position in the market can change. The economy can change. And that's why the richness of revisiting that plan on a consistent canter and actually discussing, do we need to pivot here? Is there something different we need to do with respect to this one strategy that we have in place? That is the essence of successful execution of strategy, is to be able to continually drive the execution and stay focused on those long-term goals.
Well, let's move that right into the big idea, because now you're at Vistage, and Vistage has made a big impact on me personally and professionally, because I was looking, what I found happened was, even though I always reported to either the CEO or, like when I was in a multi-billion-dollar organization, the second in command, but typically I was reporting to the CEO, and I was very autonomous because of my nature, a self-starter and so forth. And I need just a little bit of feedback and I can fly. So I didn't realize how much I was missing, and I was falling prey to that isolation that's talked about a lot amongst CEOs, when you feel like you can't talk to anybody because you certainly can't really tell employees and clients what you're going through. So Vistage has made a big impact on the isolation. It's made a big impact on, even though I'm very accountable and self-accountable, it still pushes you, because those areas that you like the least, you're going to slide off and rationalize away. And so it really has enabled me to have that, and then the group interaction, becoming friends with people, but also the issues processing. So Vistage has made a big difference for me. But as a Vistage chair, what would you say to someone, because we have a lot of C-suite listeners, what would you say to someone that doesn't know much about Vistage, and what's the big idea about Vistage, why they should consider it?
I think you touched on one of the key things. There's a great article, Harvard Business Review article, called Beyond the Echo Chamber. Excellent article. And what it talks about in this article is how isolated key decision makers can become, and how the core group of people they have under their tent, whether it's their leadership team or their talented external advisors, be it their lawyers, their accounting firm, whatever, how every one of those people has a vested interest in every decision that CEO is making. And because of that, while they are very, very helpful and critical to the success of the company, that CEO does not have somewhere to go to talk to a group of people who are unbiased, who have no agendas, who are not somehow going to benefit or not benefit by the way that decision goes. And if I have to put my finger on the essence of the power of Vistage for any senior executive, and I have to tell you, I would have loved to have been a Vistage member when I was at Mark USA, Dave, just like you. I mean, oh my gosh, there were times I could have used this group.
I wish I could have joined earlier. I wish I'd had the presence of mind to join earlier.
Absolutely. And it's interesting that you say that, and I'll get back on track, but my members say that. My members say, oh my gosh, I should have done this 10 years ago. the fixing that isolation problem, providing that safe place with a group of people who are not necessarily like-minded with you. They may disagree with you, but who care about you and have no vested interest, and at the same time bring amazing skills and experiences to the table to help you make better decisions and become a leader, is the essence of what Vistage is all about. I have one of my members who makes me smile, always says, I can't find this anywhere else. I can't believe what I have here that I never had. And, I think about and he says it with passion and emotion, and I think about those words, and it's pretty remarkable that he would share that in an open forum, candidly, not just with our members, but anyone who will listen, that's the impact on him. And, each of my members is in the course of many difficult decisions. As executives, we are paid to make great decisions. And yet, I think a lot of the time, back to my encumbered by the facts, we may not have at hand the right people, the right resources, and the right information to make those great decisions. And what Vistage does is helps our CEOs and our other members to get through and with much greater confidence to make the decision that's best for their company.
There's a couple of things about that you touched on. One is the direct relationship with the chair that each member has. They have a one-to-one meeting every month that you prep for, and then you have the meeting. Then after the meeting, you're given a personal action summary that you have to write on a triplicate paper what you're going to do. And so then if you don't live up to it, we're all competitors, so that plays to it. You also have access to that chair beyond that. And that's the thing that I think is great. The chair isn't required to respond to all my emails, or when I text Chuck and say, Chuck, I'm heading into a meeting tomorrow. Can you just text me back your thoughts on this, and can we talk for 10 minutes? And then the second piece is the group dynamic of having the issues processing, where somebody brings an issue and all 15, 17 of you go around the room and follow the systematic way to process that issue. That's huge. Then, of course, the relationships you build from doing that with the members in your group. And then there's also another thing, the whole big network and the online resources. Now, the online stuff needs to improve. I've complained as a member that their online experience is getting better, but it's still not where it needs to be. But there are tremendous resources. There's Fridays with Vistage, which is a weekly webinar. There's podcasts, and there's that whole network where you can actually post a question to the entire network, which I don't have the courage to do that yet, to send something to 21,000 people and say, this is where I need help. But I landed a client from that. Somebody posted something they needed help. And actually,
wow.
It's an interesting little story.
That's awesome.
They posted this thing, and they said over 700 people responded, of which represented something like 78 companies or something, because some people just responded and didn't really have a company to do it. And then out of those 78, I think they talked to 15 on the phone quickly. Then they let 6 do a presentation, and they narrowed down the final 2 and chose us. So
congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you. That was huge.
Great.
And they met over the phone. They met team members, and they got to talk to 2 or 3 people at Mass Solutions. They got to see our process. But the point is, first of all, that was a big move for me that Vistage showed personal growth, because normally I'd have just went, I don't like that kind of stuff. Yeah. I don't want to respond in front of everybody. So just responding was something that took courage, because it's just, it's out there. But then to win that was really gratifying for us, because it's actually in the state of California. So to land a client from across the country was pretty cool. But that online resources and that whole network, that is something that I think that Vistage could probably even market better. They could probably talk about that more.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
So Tricia, what didn't I ask you thought I might?
Wow. What didn't you ask me that? Huh.
Or is there anything else you want to just mention before we close out episode 2?
Dave, I think probably if I were to summarize some of what we said, and it's a thread that goes through my whole career. One word comes to mind, and that's focus. No matter what you're doing in your career, no matter whether you're leading a company or working for a company or you're working for a not-for-profit, to be able to commit yourself to very clear objectives and then hold yourself accountable to move your agenda forward requires focus, and it requires discipline. And it's hard because we all have our families and our employees and our clients tugging at us constantly to go in some other direction, and to have that presence of mind to continue to move forward in a focused way, to me, is probably one of the most important lessons I've learned in my life. And it's something that I bring into the Vistage world because it's something that we all struggle with. And Vistage helps my members to be more focused on what's important.
Tricia, Warrick, thanks for being on the No BS Marketing Show.
Thank you, Dave. Great to be here.
Hey, No BSers, if you like the No BS Marketing Show, please post a review. Your positive reviews go a long way towards spreading the word about the No BS Marketing Show. Thanks in advance for taking the time. If you'd like to ask me a question or suggest a guest or anything else related to the show, email me at dave@masssolutions.biz. Look forward to hearing from you. Thanks again for joining us for the No BS Marketing Show. Again, masssolutions.biz will get you the show notes plus additional marketing and messaging resources. Sign up for the No BS Marketing Weekly Update. You'll receive timely, valuable ideas to improve your marketing and transform your message. It's light, intended to be read in 2 minutes or less, and it just might trigger bright ideas for you. Again, masssolutions.biz. Remember, ask yourself, what's the big idea? And build your story around the answer. It's all about bold solutions